Hi, Dr. Jim Fox here. As a reminder, this video is made in support of Dr. Stanley Pogrow's Authentic Textbook series. Links to these books can be found below. In today's video, we're going to be looking at data cleaning in Excel. If you have never heard this term before, you might be thinking that sounds sort of unethical to do. It's not. It's a very critical first step that researchers take when we receive a data set. Ultimately, we have to prepare that data set for analysis. We can't just use the original raw data set that comes in. So I want to show you how to do that today. Before we actually begin cleaning the data set, we need to take care of a few things. Number one, does your data set have a code sheet with data elements? What is that? This data set actually does, so it's on a different worksheet. I'll click on that. And all that is simply a listing of all the variables, a description of the variables and the values. So if this isn't a data set that you collected yourself, maybe a secondary data set someone else has collected, you have to familiarize yourself with every single variable to understand what you really have in front of you. So it's a really important tool. Let's go back. Number two, original data set preservation. What does that mean? Well, when you receive a data set, whether you collected it or someone else collected it, you have raw data here in front of you. And it is so important, if you're going to be working and doing analysis and with the data here, that you actually preserve a copy of the original someplace else. So very simply, you just do a file save as, and right now I'm just going to put it on my desktop, but what I'm going to do is change the word original to copy. So, and then put that on my desktop and save it. So now I'm working with a copy. If I take out variables or if I clean the data and I mess something up, I know that I can always go back to that original file. Number three, when you're cleaning data, you really need this header row to stay exactly where it is. You'll notice if I start scrolling down, all of a sudden it's gone and you can't see what variables you're actually working with. So to do that, all you have to do is go up to, you're in the Home tab right now, but you go over to View and then down to Freeze Panes and simply freeze the top row. Now, when I begin to scroll, that top row stays exactly where it is. It's very handy. Sometimes you may want to, depending on the type of data you're working with, freeze the first column, but it's most appropriate right now with this data set to freeze that top pane. Number four. When you get a data set, it's very important that you have a unique identifier for each row of your data. So I'm going to do that right now. All I do is simply click on the A, and then in the Home tab, go right over to Insert and Insert Sheet Column. So what I've done is I've created a new column, and I'm simply going to label this as ID. A really handy little feature to make this look like all the other header rows is to click B1, go right up to Format Painter, and then go back to A1. And it makes it look just like the others. Now, this unique identifier, you just start with 1, 2, 3, and once you have a pattern there, highlight the 3, go down to the little green box, and simply drag all the way down to the bottom. You'll notice closer that you get to the bottom, it'll slow down for you. That's good. And then let go. So now we have a unique identifier for every row of data. Why is this important? I'm going to center this up real quick. Why is this important? Because when you're cleaning the data, you need to take very careful notes. So if you change something, like if you find out that this N right here should actually be a Y, then you would make note of it that ID number 12, you changed it from N to Y. And obviously that probably isn't the case at all. But you do want to take good notes, and this is a way to identify every single row in your data set. The fifth thing and the last thing prior to actually cleaning the data set is the most important one. What you have in front of you is just text in individual cells. But we want to turn on a very powerful feature of Excel and actually turn this data set into a table. To do that, it's very simple. Just click on any cell in the data set, go up to Insert, and then down to Table. It's going to bring up a little box here, and basically it's saying, where's your data? It went out and found your data, and it also has My Table Has Headers checked, which it does. Click OK, and what you have just done is turned individual cell data into an actual table. And for cleaning purposes, we're going to use these little drop down arrows, and we'll be doing that in just a moment. Okay, we are finally ready to clean our data set, and we're going to be doing two different things. Number one, we're going to be looking for any superfluous variables that are completely irrelevant to our data analysis, and we're going to be removing them. And the second thing is really the reason that we do the data set cleaning. We're looking for human errors, data entry errors in our data set, and we're fixing them. So let's get started. So you may have noticed I changed data sets. The data set that we had been working with is a really good data set and didn't have any superfluous variables. But I want to show you an example of one that does. I recently collected data using a third-party service called Qualtrics. It's very similar to SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. Anytime you collect data using these types of devices or tools, then when you go to export the data and then import it into Excel, oftentimes, almost always, they will create additional variables having to do with the data collection process. So in this case, there's a start date, an end date, a status response type, and so forth. I don't need these for my data analysis. So I'm going to click on A and select or highlight a number of different columns. And right there through Q, this is the data that I'm not concerned about, and I'd like to remove it. It's superfluous. So I go up to the Home tab and then over to Delete and simply delete sheet columns. Now I have data that I can work with, that's a part of my analysis, and so forth. The other reason that we look for superfluous variables is oftentimes in education, we're working with large data sets that we got from maybe the government or a school district. Sometimes those data sets will have 50, 60, 70, 125 variables, and we're only interested in really a small amount, maybe 10. So what we want to do is we want to make a copy, save the original data set somewhere. Working in that copy, let's get rid of the 110 or 120 variables that we're not going to be using that don't have anything to do with our data analysis. And so we remove them. So it's much easier to manage the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, let's bring our original data set back in and do some data cleaning by looking for data entry errors, human errors. So I know, and I've already checked the first three variables, but let's start with age. I mentioned that we turned this, prior to doing the data cleaning, we turned this data set into a table, and we have these drop down arrows here in each one of the variable boxes. So I'm going to click on that, and we see two things here of interest to us, very powerful tools for data cleaning. The first one is a sorting feature from smallest to largest, largest to smallest, and then down on the bottom we have a filtering feature. For age, let's sort this age variable from smallest to largest. Okay, So we just did that, and the very first thing that I see is there is someone who is the age of 4 in our data set. Now, this is problematic because this is a community college student data set. This is most definitely human error, data entry error, and I have a feeling just looking over at the case ID, I'm wondering if they maybe were looking at the wrong column and actually typed, they thought they maybe were typed, who knows? But what we do know is it's a data entry error, human error. Now, we need to be very careful not to actually change them if we don't know what the variable is or should be, or there isn't a reason to. So in this case, we probably would go back to the person that we got the data set from and we ask for clarification. What if we don't know who we got? I mean, what if it's a public data set and we really can't go back to anyone? All we simply do is we don't delete these cases. We do the analysis as normal, but anytime we want to use the age variable in a particular data analysis, we're going to filter out ID 8, 9, 10, and 11 because we know that this age, using it, is going to skew our results. Okay, let's go back up to the drop-down arrow. This time, let's use the filter feature. So I can toggle this off, on and off, on and off. Let's turn them all off, and let's just filter out or actually view the ones that look problematic. So we know the 4 is problematic. We already said that. And as I'm looking down, these ages look normal. And there are probably maybe a few older students in the mix there. That's not, that's reasonable. Now I see a person who is, or persons who are 200 years old. Yeah, this definitely is human error. And also I see a 25 in here. So I'm going to click on that as well. Let's take a look at these cases. Okay, we already talked about the 4, so we're not going to do anything with them right now. We're going to make a note in our notes that ID 8, 9, 10, and 11 in the age category, it's incorrect, and we're not going to use them for data analysis if we're using the age variable. But the 200 here, it seems logical that if this person is probably 20 years old, and changing it to 20 isn't really going to have any really bad consequence on our data analysis. There's a good chance that the human who did the data entry simply added an additional 0. How about the 25 in? Well, I went and checked with the code sheet with data elements and found that in the age category, there's no use of any letters after the age. So that's probably a slip of the finger as well on the keyboard. We're going to change that to 25, and now we've cleaned the age variable. Let me go back up, do the drop down, select all of them, and click OK. Now, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll also go back to the ID if things are out of order, and I'll kind of put it back the way it was. Let's go to the next one, the gender code, and let's do the drop down arrow. In this case, I see there are 3 unique responses here, F, M, and N. So I actually looked at the code sheet with data elements, and I found out that under gender, the N means not specified. So I know that's a good value. If I didn't know that, and if I looked in the code sheet and there's no N, then I would take a look at that variable, and maybe I would need to delete it or change it. Okay. Let's go on over to ethnicity. I'll do the drop down arrow. And for this one, I'm going to unselect all of the different options, unique values. And I'm simply going to read through to see if I see anything abnormal. Yep, there's a Hispanic. That doesn't make sense. I have a feeling that should be Hispanic. And then I also see a multiracial, which I already know because I've looked at the code sheet that their multiracial isn't an option. It should be multi-races. I have a feeling that the human error here may have been putting an IAL instead of an ES on the end of multi, should be multi-races. And I'm looking at the rest of them. The rest of them look okay, so I click OK. Now I have filtered out just the four that, there are four here that are abnormal, so I'm going to change this to ES, and then for Hispanic, I'm going to go up and put an S, Hispanic, and an S here, and then I'm going to go and select all again. Okay, so it's back in order. Now I could keep on going, but I'm not. But that's what we do when we clean the data set. We look at every individual variable and we make sure that we fix any human errors if possible. Okay, hopefully that's helpful to you, and blessings. So there you have it, data cleaning in Excel. I sure hope this video was helpful to you, and as a reminder, I want to summarize what we just learned. We've talked about making sure that all data sets have a code sheet with data elements. We also talked about preserving the original data set and calling the one that you're working with a copy, and then saving the original in a safe place. We also talked about freezing the top row by simply in the Home, going over to View, and then Freeze Panes. The next thing we did was we created a unique variable, unique identifying variable for each row of our data by highlighting A, going to Home, and then inserting a column. Then we called it ID. The last thing we did in preparing for data cleaning was to what I referred to as insert a table. I'll do that again. We're normally on the Home, insert a table, and it goes out and finds all of the data, and you simply click OK. Now, I use that terminology, insert table, because that's the buttons that you need to click on. But actually what it's really referred to is converting a data set into a table. The next thing we did was actually clean our data, and we did so by taking a look at the little drop-down menus that were created by converting a data set into a table. And under there, we have two things. We have sort, and then we have filter. It was very easy to see using either our sort or the filter by unselecting and then selecting the ones that looked problematic and then clicking OK. Then we simply went in and made the changes that were necessary. Again, I hope this video was helpful to you, and blessings.